Today's speakers are John Ferrioli, the Senior Vice President of Master Data Solutions at Utopia, and Raghav Sharma, Client Partner for the Utilities Industry with Utopia, as well as the Client Partner for the West region. With that, Raghav, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Terry. I appreciate it. As Terry just introduced me, I am the Client Partner for the West and the utilities. Thank you for joining our webinar today. I wanted to quickly go ahead and request John to introduce himself, just a little bit about his background, and then I'll do the same and then get started really quickly. So John, could you introduce yourself, sir?
Sure. Thanks, Raghav. So my name is John Ferrioli, and I'm Senior Vice President for Master Data Solutions at Utopia. I've been in the data space for more than a decade and have been working with Utopia for the past coming up on 5 years. And prior to joining Utopia, I was responsible for the Master Data Management solution at SAP, where I led the global rollout of that solution, and then later was responsible for North America as the Vice President of SAP's NetWeaver solution portfolio. So I'm pleased to be sharing some information and sharing some guidance around data management and enabling a governance organization today with my colleague Raghav.
Thanks, John. So we'll get started, and before we do, I wanted to give you a little bit of information about Utopia as a company. Not so much for it to be a sales pitch, but more so from the point of view of what gives us the right to be standing here or be presenting here and talking about enterprise data management to you. So we are a company that has been around for about 10 years and is very focused in the data management space. And if we look at our history a little bit and also what we do right now, our background has started in the master data management space. So everything from be data services or be it setting up data governance organizations, the kind of things that we're going to discuss today. And then from there on, we've done a lot of projects in transactional data. And then lately we have gotten more into the enterprise insights and what we call actionable insights, where as an enterprise you are trying to get something done more so on a business and operations side, and the question then becomes, does your data allow you to do that? And so and it goes back to, again, the master data management processes and governance in place, which is what today's webinar is. And it's in terms of the things that we do, it's everything from strategy to technology implementation, doing things that are data services related, people and processes. That's one area that in many cases is left out, and we will spend quite some time discussing that today. And then more importantly, the methodology to make all of these things happen. It's more like a framework. It's good to do all of these things. It's good for us to be talking about that, but it's great when we have other third parties acknowledge us for the kind of work that we've done. And so we have SAP who gave us their Partner of the Year for 2010. Gartner has considered us to be a thought leader in this field, and now we have constantly been part of the Incorporated 500 growth companies. So it's a pretty good story, but more importantly, it's the kind of customers that we have that brings us here to share this thing with you. Today's webinar and today's discussion is a little bit about the entire approach of setting up a master data management. And what we will cover today is, number one, why do we focus on a more comprehensive and a holistic approach? Why is that important? What are some of the things that we have seen as we have gone in the organizations? What is the advantage of an enterprise data management program? And you will also interchangeably with that see the term enterprise data lifecycle management, which is similar to enterprise data management. It's a term that has been coined by Utopia. So every now and then you will see that term. It is essentially the same. How do you put together an enterprise data management framework before you embark on such a journey. We'll talk a little bit about that. And as we go about, if you think about it on a high level, it is basically to check whether your data is clean, clean it, and then create a structure to make sure that it is kept clean and pristine on the long run. And that's essentially what the approach is. You know, when we talk about data quality and profiling, data governance, organization, setting up technology to enforce those kind of rules, and then time permitting, we'll have a few case studies to go along with it. But this is the approach that we are sharing here is the kind where we can actually go into an organization and say, okay, this is a complete start to end approach where you know, we can assist or you know, it could be an internal project on your side where you can go to the management and say, here are the advantages of having us a data management program, and it's not just a matter of that it's good to have, but here are actual dollars and cents why this is important to the company. And number two, how we can actually see where we are today, correct, and ensure that the data is clean and make sure that that happens on the long term. So it's entirely a comprehensive approach there. So starting from the first piece is why are we here? What we have seen in many cases is that when we go to companies, there are a lot of incomplete data projects. Somebody has done some sort of profile and then kind of stopped there. There are data forums that are being put in place, but they don't really have any sort of a tool to enforce the kind of rules that they have set in place, or they have rules but really don't have the backing of the management, or it could even be that they don't have a structure by which they are going and growing in terms of their program. We've also seen that in many cases there are people who are trying to embark on a program just have not gotten the right people to buy off on such a program, be it people in processes or be it technology to get to that point. So that is essentially the reason why we have gone back to the drawing board and said, hey, what would be the best way to do this? And the best way to do this is to go in and say, okay, this is why this is important, and this is what it will take to get things done from here to there. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to John for starting from the next slide, where he'll share a little bit about what we mean by enterprise data, and then from there on, take it from there, John. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Raghav. So what I want to cover is and introduce in this webinar today are a number of frameworks that can be leveraged to help your data management organization become enabled. And that's really our theme today. So as we view data, we see it as the foundation to your business process optimization as well as your analytical and reporting insights. So if we reverse from the foundation and take a look at the top, at the apex of this framework, we see executive dashboards for business intelligence and business warehouse if you're an SAP customer. What we are talking about is a competitive advantage, the ability to have business insight, to be able to bet your job on the integrity of the report, to make the right decision in a consistent fashion. And also, from a business process perspective, to be able to optimize SAP and non-SAP business processes, because effectively the applications and the reporting tools are only as good as the data that they're executing against. This foundation of enterprise data, which is combined by incorporating master data, which is generally thought of as structured data. This is your master data, your transactional data, sales orders, purchase orders to specific customers, and what is the product or service represented as master data, and then enterprise content management or unstructured data. And these are your documents, your drawings, your schematics, your piping and instrumentation displays, your engineering drawings, and other marketing PDFs or material safety data sheets. This comprises roughly, unstructured data is approximately 70 to 80% of an enterprise's data. So it's important that when you're thinking about data management to consider both structured and unstructured. But ultimately, at Utopia, we view data as an asset for the life cycle. And this is the orchestrated processes of how data is created and managed and migrated, how data is maintained in the system, how it's distributed for collaboration, how that data becomes information once going through a business process and becomes transactional so that you can do analytics and even predictive analytics and have the insight and decision making that valued reports bring to the table. And then ultimately, what's the end of life for the data when you archive and either decommission a system or retire data because the retention policy is passed? For example, how long do you keep a vendor in your production systems? All right? So our approach is holistic with respect to a data lifecycle management framework, and we call this EDLM. And what it brings to the table is multiple considerations, orchestration of processes to manage the data for the lifecycle. As we go through the agenda, we also want to talk about, well, what are the advantages? You know, why do this in the first place, right? What's the return on investment? And how do we get the most value of managing data? Well, as Raghav alluded to, there are a number of reasons why there's challenges in master data or enterprise data management initiatives. And we submit to you that the framework for EDLM is an excellent way to support a holistic vision for managing data as an asset. Now, when we look at the return on investment, it's often business pain is palpable and tenable within an organization related to ineffective business decisions through lack of consistent information, delayed go-to-market processes. In other words, your supply chain is not optimized. Your inventory optimization is corrupted by bad information through the material master, through your suppliers, and lack of real-time information to make not only risk management decisions, but ultimately how to optimize your company's revenues and as well as your compliance. So without a consolidated view of your customer data across all your channels, or the ability to do geography-based territory alignment and the analytics on which customers are your most valuable, or which plant is optimized and which plant is sub-optimized, right? Do I have operating efficiencies? Without that data, you're reducing your opportunity for generating revenue and also serving your constituents and serving your customers. So from a risk perspective, we want to be able to address these issues proactively. And the key message, of course, is that across all areas, whether it's information technology through efficiencies in IT and reduced maintenance cost, or going live on time without disruption or risk, or people not having trust in the systems, or being able to be more compliant to your regulators, or in optimizing a supply chain. If you show me a business process optimization opportunity or reporting analytics opportunity, I will show you at a root cause how master data is at the foundation for solving or corrupting that process. So it's important to know, like anything else, that garbage in translates to garbage out, but the business benefits are often unforeseen and often not recognized when talking about data management, because it's a process-centric world. So understand the foundation of data as it relates to your business processes and your reporting insights, and ultimately meeting your company goals. And we can reverse engineer into the data and show a correlation from a business case as to how data is core to process optimization. Now, at a high level, I just showed you a high level. If we dig deeper, we have value calculators and quantifiers that will allow us to work with you in building a business case for data. And again, whether it's operations or IT or procurement, efficiencies or new product introduction, what it translates to is that there are a number of categories for your company's initiatives and key drivers that we can map to, as well as work with you to calculate and to determine what's the anticipated ROI, what's the business value of making an investment in data. The other thing that we like to bring to the table from enabling data management organizations is a roadmap. It's one thing to have a strategy in place. It's another to have a tactical, executable roadmap which has defined project charters, timings, which are aligned to your business initiatives, a clear direction to execute your strategy, and actionable steps, and in the investment plan. So it's not just about here's your strategy for data, but it's how do you bring it to life, how do you make it an enabling organization, and how do you bring value to the organization, and also, frankly, what is the time, the money, and the resources required to get you there. It's important to know where you're going. It's important to also know what is my investment, what is my expected return on investment. As we go forward, we're looking at enterprise data management, or what we call enterprise data lifecycle management frameworks. And so first we're talking about establishing a strategy and the ROI and the business case for data. Now we're getting a little bit deeper into what are the frameworks. One of the frameworks we like to introduce is called a 4 squares reference architecture, which is represented here. And this is the intersection of data process, your data frameworks, with your business processes, your applications, and your systems, so that it's a cohesive foundation for your business and how people view data. And the analogy I would put in front of you is that if we were to walk down the halls of IT or within your organization, we're almost certain we would see a physical network infrastructure represented in a large engineering drawing. We'd probably also see, your ERP or SAP deployment schedule. In other words, where are you going, how are you getting there, and what's your reference architecture? Well, it's the same requirement, but is often overlooked, is the data framework and how that meets and maps the data requirements to support your processes and your apps and your systems for enterprise objectives, understanding some of the compliance and industry drivers. For example, in utilities, you're looking at enterprise asset management, you're looking at fixed assets, inventory optimization, regulatory compliance. You're also looking at other drivers like meter data management, another MDM, right? And how do you provide a single unified billing to a client if you provide water, electric, and other services in the utility space? So we look at industry standards and best practices around this framework, and then we also incorporate that into your program planning. The key consideration is that do you have a conceptual data model, a logical, a physical data model that maps to your business application, so that when IT is rolling out SAP modules and new systems, or or your company is acquiring organizations, is data a key tenet or canon of discipline for how you manage? And this EDLM framework, this 4 squares reference architecture, gets people thinking about architecturally, how do I get the data right in concert to the process, in concert to the app? Now the next framework that I would introduce, or that Utopia would introduce, is the best practices that we've seen from the ASUG community, the America's SAP User Group, related to managing data. And you'll note that there's not just one silver bullet. In fact, it's orchestration of processes for many, many things. So it's your architectural considerations. When, where, and how is the data entered, stored, transmitted, reported? How is it secured? How is it backed up? How is it made available? And that reference architecture of how does data get created into an SAP landscape, and how is it maintained for consistency over time? Your data standards. This is everything from defining common data definitions to your hierarchies, your taxonomy, and the business functional needs. So how do you abbreviate St. John Street? How do you ensure that the repair crew goes to the right address at the right time? How does your supply chain become optimized or sub-optimized by poor data standards? Shipping the wrong product to the wrong location with the wrong tax ID, right? This is all corruptible processes due to data. Governance is, as we work our way through the wheel, governance are the considerations of your people, right? Who owns the data policy? And what are their specific roles and responsibilities? Are they IT? Are they business? Where do they fit? Data quality metrics. Now, this is defining so that you can measure and manage effectively the integrity of your data. How do you know when your data is considered operationally or analytically valid? And so establishing data quality metrics is another key alignment, and you can align those metrics with roles and responsibilities, but also outcomes, i.e., if I don't have a consolidated, cleansed view of the vendor master, it's very difficult for me to be compliant for minority spend reporting, but it's also very difficult for me to be enabling global spend analytics so that I can, consolidate and achieve strategic sourcing. So data quality metrics is another key dimension. And then finally, as a best practice in an orchestration of processes is your deployment phase or your change management phase. And this is really when you're implementing your data processes. And you are orchestrating all these things together as a process versus as a technology. And as they come together, you have change management disciplines that are critical because long after the implementation of a technology, the data has life, and between mergers and acquisition and divestitures and changes in compliance drivers, you can imagine how frequently data requirements change. So it's living, breathing, and the deployment phase, the change management phase, is critical. Now, one thing to consider is that from all the studies that have been done and all the insights that have been done around best practices, one thing is clear, that if you only select one or two of these processes for managing data, you're generally not going to see the best results. So you could set up a governance organization with people, but if you don't have the architecture to support it, or if you don't have data quality metrics to measure, it's going to be very difficult to sustain that because you're just going to be catching up all the time. So you need to orchestrate all these things together, and some of the studies done by the ASA community suggest that with orchestrated a comprehensive approach for enterprise data management, that you get higher budget efficiencies. In other words, you're on time, you're on budget, you're efficient, right? You're getting the most out of the organization, and you're seeing the most benefit to the organization. But you're also seeing sustainability of the program. Again, moving away from a project-centric approach and thinking in terms of duration efficiency relative to sustaining an enterprise data management initiative for the long term. Because again, it's a journey, it's not a destination. So enterprise data management is a journey, not a destination. What we like to do at Utopia is to incorporate these frameworks together. So we have interconnected frameworks. So we're balancing strategy, where you have vision and goals and direction and the principles and the frameworks in a multi-generational plan that I referenced, and then mapping that against what do we do today for business alignment? What are we doing today around ensuring that standards are in fact enforced, that your business rules are in fact enforced in a consistent manner, right? So by aligning these interconnected frameworks, we see greater sustainability of the program, we see better business buy-in, and better application of the process so that people can get their jobs done timely and get the win in a timely manner, right? And then repurpose and reuse these frameworks ongoing. So one thing that I may have missed is that you may start with the biggest pain point, and it could be in utilities, it could be material master. In CPG, it could be customer. If you're trying to solve spend analytics and strategic sourcing, you may want to tackle the vendor master. The key is that these frameworks are aligned to a scale for multiple objects as you continue your journey. So wherever the pain is, where the business case is, we start there and then expand to other objects downstream. Now we're going to jump into getting even further into the tactical execution, the enablement, which is data quality and cleansing, right? Profiling, and then the people and process of the organization. Now, if we look at sources of data quality problems, and this comes from TDWI, which is the Data Warehousing Institute, they submit, and from surveys that they've done, is that data entry by employees or by customers or by far and away and changes to source system are by far and away sources of data quality problems in the enterprise. You'll also look at things like data migration or conversion projects. I'm going to have data conversion. I'm going to have instance consolidations. I'm going to retire a legacy ERP system and wrap that in. I'm acquiring a company. I'm going to wrap their data in. Well, the key thing is that loading data or entering data is easy, but loading the right data with the right format ready for business consumption is hard. So loading data or entering data is easy. Loading the right data with the right format ready for business consumption, that's hard. And so it's understanding your data quality dimensions. It's understanding the metrics behind data quality that you can manage against. And I'm not going to drill through on every particular bullet here, but it's important to understand that, you know, in working with a partner, that they can bring some content to the table which is valid, but also relevant for your organization to adopt. It doesn't do any good if your organization is given a set of directives that can't be executed against when it comes to your data management strategies. So we try to tie the data quality metrics into measurable attributes which are measured on a regular basis through data profiling. If you're an SAP environment, most familiar would be Information Steward as a data profiling solution, and we can establish these metrics, whether it's completeness of the record, right? In other words, do I have a tax ID requirement, but the tax ID field is blank? Consistency. How do we consistently apply our data standards? Are you looking at UNSPSC or EOTD or ISO standards? And then how are you enforcing a taxonomy structure, a noun modifier attribute structure to the data in a consistent way? Conformity to standards and duplication, right? Exact matches, functional equivalence along the lines. When we look into establishing these metrics, then we can set up with Information Steward or other technologies, we can dig deep and profile the data. So here you see, you know, your metrics around consistency of the data. In this case, we're looking at valid and invalid records with the vendor master from two different systems. In this case, a client has 67% of their vendor master records are marked for deletion or invalid in production systems. Now that translates to risk, not only from a maintenance perspective, but from a who are my vendors, who are my strategic sourcing partners? Are we compliant? In other words, do we have risk associated with this because a purchase order, for example, could be executed against an inactive vendor that's in your production ERP systems? And then what are your degrees of duplicate? So the profiling dimension helps us get our arms around the data, helps us show the business where the weaknesses are. These orange boxes represent limitations in the field. Or you might have a field which is filled, like a tax ID or an address, but it's invalid. So tax ID that says 9999X, or a phone number that says 12345. Data profiling and analyzing the data helps us bring forward to the business and ask them a very simple question. Do you really want to make a decision against the data that we're executing against? Would you bet your job on the report and on the decision that you're going to make coming out of this report if the data is suspect? So this helps you build the business case and enforce standards and make sure that the quality metrics for management are done on a regular basis and that you get your arms around it. And as you get a little bit deeper into the data, right, here's a stock analysis report coming out of R3. And what you see is a client who is trying to achieve strategic sourcing, spend analytics, inventory optimization. But the problem is as we looked at their work orders and their business processes, and then we looked at their data, it started to expose how the data is, I guess the best word is corrupting their business processes. So here we see 8 functionally equivalent ball bearings. In this case, it's an SKF bearing. It's a bearing about the size of my fist, and it's used commonly in plant maintenance operations. In this case, this bearing had a removable seal that was being removed for the purposes of maintenance. Now, the issue that we found was not only did they have 8 of the same functionally equivalent material master in their system, but they were procuring it should be from 8 different vendors. One of the vendors, as you see here, is blank, okay? And here you have one vendor, Brooke-Hansen, a supplier, is providing them the same product twice. So as you look at the different planned delivery days, anywhere from 13 days through 84 days, that's going to affect how people procure in your inventory. And bloated inventory translates to millions of dollars of operating capital that's lost. They're also buying the same product, as I mentioned, from Brooke-Hansen for 2 different prices. But what's interesting is they're also buying starting anywhere from $2.54 through $19 for the same functionally equivalent part. So by exposing data at the root and mapping it to a business process, you can get business buy-in. Exposing data at the root, mapping it to a business process gives you business buy-in. And what this translates to is, the simple question is, how can you possibly achieve inventory optimization, a reduction in your carrying costs, spend analytics, where you can save anywhere between 1 and 3% of spend based on negotiated terms and strategic sourcing, but also get that planned delivery times down. Optimizing your plant, making sure you have the right part available to maintain plant operations, and ultimately getting SAP to run the way it needs to run. There truly is an economic impact to data. And we can articulate this in a lot of different ways with reports and insights of how maintenance costs are caused by higher sizing. If you have vendor master records which lack consistency or conform to standards, what's the business impact? Well, procurement strategies cannot be implemented effectively, right? Your spend, your exposure to risk when you have inactive vendors in production systems is a cause for fraud and money laundering red flags. So what we're looking at is, how do you increase system performance, get the business buy-in, but show them the correlation between data. So data profiling, data health assessments, captures the standards, captures those business rules, and then defines the metrics for you to govern accordingly and make the changes. Basically, you go where the problems are. Now, once you have the business rules and the data standards defined and the metrics defined, and you know, frankly, Utopia can help you get there, then the question is, how do you get it clean? Well, you're leveraging the investment that you've made in defining standards, the investment that you made in defining business rules for the data. And so our approach is to leverage enabling technologies rather than do it manually. And in many cases, we use leading technologies. And one of the leading technologies that we're very comfortable with is SAP's data services. And there's a number of different cleansing tools in the market today. I think there's well over 70. The question is, what's integrated? How does it all tie together holistically so that the profiling tools are aligned to the cleansing tools or aligned to the governance tools? Well, our approach from a cleansing perspective is to set up standards around cleansing the data, creating the data, how it's enriched, how do you fill in the blanks, how do you get a consistent record, how do you deduplicate and then classify from a numbering perspective the right data and the right information systems fit for consumption. So getting the data clean is one step of the process. And again, it's leveraging your data model, standards, what is the system of record, the business rules behind that, and we can give guidance with respect to that. We can help you build data models or leverage existing taxonomy structures. So if you're in oil and gas, ISO 14224 is a very well-known and established taxonomy. So we can leverage the taxonomy and build out structure from this to ensure consistent data cleansing. Now the question is, what do you do from a people and process perspective? Where does this come together so that the policies, the rules, the standards that the governance organization has invested in are brought to life? And so people and process is really about, for governance and data management, in our opinion, always, always, always mapping to the business mission statement. What is the value proposition? What is the business performance and metrics and objectives of how data enables inventory optimization, how data enables spend optimization, or how it enables regulatory compliance? All of the rules, the standards, the definitions, the policies are put forward by the data governance organization. But notice that it's cyclical, so that as you drill into what the problem is that you're trying to solve and incorporate all of these rules, definitions, and who's accountable and where is it entered and how, right, that this goes into your SAP and non-SAP systems in a consistent fashion. And that's always reverse engineered into business performance. For governance options, I can't tell you over a webinar what's going to work best for your company. We need to understand it. You need to understand it. What are the political considerations? How is the organization established? Will a decentralized organization work, or should it be federated? What about lean? What about a centralized environment? Well, politically centralized data governance may work very, very well with respect to financial objects or material master. But in the customer master, you may need a more hybrid approach. The key is to align the governance option which are best for your organization so that you can effectively execute in a consistent manner. And that's something that we can help and bring to the table. This is a representative organizational structure that takes in gray the enterprise focus and the operational focus into mind. So at an enterprise level, we're talking about a leadership team made up of business and IT execs who are responsible for process optimization or the goals of the company. And then where the organization, the data management organization, fits to support and enable business and reporting integrity. And so you can establish data trustees by category, right? The person who manages order to cash. This person is responsible for the entire process. Or you can do it by object, right? So you're not limited to a particular set. It's just what is going to work best, and the interactions and the roles and defining responsibilities of all the players in the organization and how they frankly come together for that process orchestration. The key is defining the definitions to understand who's doing what, who's responsible for what, and who's accountable, almost a racing matrix, so that you can bring people together. And again, you're not going to say to the VP of supply chain, hey, I need you to clean the data. That's not the goal here. The goal is to say to the VP of supply chain, I can optimize it. I can ensure that you can map forecasting versus planning. I can ensure that your inventory, your procurement, your distribution, your logistics, you're going to ship the right product to the right location. It's going to have the right weighting, the right unit of measure. We're going to eliminate stockouts. We're going to optimize performance. That's what a VP of supply chain wants to hear. That's what they're measured against, and data is the corrupter of those processes. So we want to be a partner to the business and work collaboratively with IT for their function of how they provide infrastructure and architecture and backup and availability. As we close out the presentation of the people and the process coming together with some of the tactical steps, you can see that a common flow when we work with companies is to establish the strategy, establish the framework of how critical data is, build the business case, right? The representation of business process with data processes. And from there, we identify goals, objectives, where you are today, where you can be tomorrow, what's your roadmap. From there, we look at best practices for data management, orchestrating them together so that you have your principles and your standards and your data policies and the governance, the roles, the people behind it, and again, politically, what's going to work for change management. As we build out the organization, right, it's tied to that framework where we're solving business problems and getting better reporting and enabling the business, and then ultimately it comes down to what is the enabling technology and how do we automate what we've been doing manually. How do we streamline processes? How do we reduce the number of cycles it takes to create a material master? Or do we have BOM completeness? Or are units of measure standardized? Right? These are all aligned to business and to figure out what do we tackle first, because you're never going to cure all the problems. Right? As soon as you get it done, you'll acquire somebody else, or compliance regulatory regulations will change. And so it's important to know that it's a journey, not a destination, with data governance, but all projects that are sustained have to continue to show business value, and that is the #1 killer of data management initiatives. So we always want to map to the business. We do want to understand your maturity. As I mentioned, where are you in the organization, where you are today, based on many, many disciplines, and how are you going to get to that desired target? And then how do you get to the next level? The key is not to undertake things that you can't execute. It doesn't make any sense to try to get to a standard of excellence that simply you don't have the resources for, the time for, the budget for, or the organizational commitment to achieve. So we want to be able to set objectives which will give you the results, but are not so far-fetched that it's a fantasy. Right, and it's a delicate balance between strategy and tactical execution. And really, all people really want to get to is give me my strategy so I can get to execution. Now, from a technology perspective, one of the ways that you can consistently enforce data into your ERP systems is with SAP Master Data Governance, also known as MDG. So again, an enabling technology that's going to enforce your rules, the data standards, the metrics in a consistent fashion so that you have process orchestration for the creation of the master data, how the data is validated against your rules and standards and policies, and that you can leverage a data process-centric application for centralized governance. Now, MDG supports an SAP landscape. It's based on the ABAP stack, leveraging ECC as a repository. But what's important here is to know that it can support SAP applications and non-SAP applications. But I wanted to bring forward MDG because, one, it's a solution that we know works, but we also know that it doesn't do you any good to clean the data if you don't have a sustainable way to maintain and ensure good data is going to be in the system going forward. Because over time, the data that you've spent an investment in to clean is going to be corrupted. People will call it bearing ball, ball bearing, SKF bearing. They'll call it Tom Smith, Thomas Smith, Tommy Smith, and on and on and on. Thomas Joseph Smith. And so data without structure, without rules being enforced in a consistent manner, can become unmaintained and go back to the original state. So getting it clean is one thing, keeping it clean for the life cycle is another, and MDG is a technology enabler in that capacity. As I'm looking at the clock, we can maybe take up a discussion, any Q&A on implementation options. I do have a couple of case studies that you'll get a copy of the deck, but for example, CSL Bearing, very quickly, they wanted a 360-degree view of the customer. They wanted to maintain their data integrity. But along the way, they saw value in customer profitability analysis, cross-selling and upselling. In their industry, which is life sciences, they're dealing with compliance to the Sunshine Act, which is how much money am I influencing or spending with vendors? And I need to track that because if I buy a doctor or a physician admittance to a conference, are they tied to a hospital group? Are they tied to another company? Do I have undue influence? And this has to be reported to the federal government. So we were able to, in a very short amount of time, literally, a 6-week engagement, help come in and establish job descriptions, roles, responsibilities. We interviewed 60 people across the organization for risk and readiness assessment for data. We looked at a risk mitigation plan. We did stakeholder analysis. We helped them build the business case for data. And we put together infrastructure assessments, all within 6 weeks. So our ability to come in and in a very effective way to help you leapfrog from where you've been to a structured environment and then build upon that, as we have with CSL over the last few years, it's a journey, not a destination. So we've done data quality work, we've done data profiling and analysis work for them, we've helped them with standards, and we're continuing to help them with maintaining the data for the life cycle. So CSL is a good example, and we've also done this with other major players, as Kimberly-Clark that you see here, and they had everything from global financial consolidations and as well as operational efficiency and getting a global view for reporting and leverage. They had many, many systems, SAP and non-SAP, and the ultimate goal was, how do I get a global view of my business? And the long pole in the tent, frankly, was not the report, but the consolidation of the report and the integrity of the report so that they could get the right definition, visibility for their customer and for the financial, and also enable things like global spend. So we only have a short amount of time left. There was a lot of content presented today. I'm going to open it up to any questions. And again, just because the webinar has ended, we'd certainly like to continue the dialogue. So Raghav covers all utilities for North America. He also covers the West region. And I'm certainly available at any time to share additional stories or insights of how Utopia might be able to help you in your enterprise data management enablement. Terry, Raghav?
Okay, the floor is now open for questions you might have. You may enter them into the question pane located on the right-hand side of your window. We'll see how many we can get to in the time frame. We want to be sensitive to your time. There were a couple, John, that came in during the presentation, so we'll start with those. If we have started a data management program as a company, can it be assessed and put into a framework like yours, or would we be restarting from scratch?
Oh, okay. Okay, so that's a great question, and here's the thing. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. One of the most powerful benefits of frameworks is that chances are you have started somewhere, right? This is not starting from scratch and nothing exists and there are no standards or there's no architecture or no governance organization. Sometimes we come into that, but mostly, as mentioned, it's a journey. So what we can do is to leverage your current investments and where you've done work in the past and bring them forward into the frameworks, right? We want to make sure they're valid, but we want to make sure that we don't have any gaps from a holistic perspective. And it's not uncommon for many companies to have, hey, here are my standards. We had a project that was called, Unite or Harmony or Symphony or something like that, but we have a data dictionary. We have a data model. Or we have a data model for United States customer, but we don't have it for global customer. So we can take and work with you collaboratively on the journey and take the components that you have today, certainly want to validate with you, make sure they're still relevant, and then bring them forward as part of the rollout. And that saves us time and effort, but it also helps us accelerate you to the phases of where you're providing the most value and getting the most wins by meeting your objectives. So absolutely, we can help you accelerate and help you move forward. Great question.
Okay, next question. You mentioned early in the presentation tools to create a business case for a data management program. Can you speak to what those are or how they can be accessed?
So within our partnership with SAP, we have built out a value calculator, okay, which has common, I'm just trying to get to the slide, but it has, common calculators for defining what the impact will be or what the impact can be on particular business processes. So we know, based on many, many analyst reports and many, many case studies and commonly held, that when you get into leveraged spend, okay, global spend or strategic sourcing, generally folks are going to accept or expect anywhere between 1% and 3% of global spend to be saved because you're able to negotiate best price, you can get better delivery terms, you can get better financing terms, you can reduce planned delivery times, and you can reduce the cost of what you're paying for something, products or services, because it's a volume discount. And you can guarantee to the supplier, hey, we are going to do, for all of our business, for this particular equipment or material master or for these services, we're going to buy a lot from you because we buy a lot from a lot of different people. We want to strategically source through you, but you're going to need to sharpen your pencil. And if you think that customers don't come to Utopia and tell us that, well, you'd be, maybe stretching the truth. But customers can leverage spend much more efficiently if they have insights into what are the products that they're buying. Sorry about that background noise. What are the products that they're buying, and what are the solutions that they're going to be procuring? And so if we estimate 1 to 3%, we get the business to say, look, I don't believe it's 3%, I believe it's 1%. Well, if you're a decent-sized company and you're spending $1 billion on spend, well, 1% of $1 billion is $10 million. And that's a very, very significant ROI. So getting to that value calculator, we can share that. We can expose it to you. We can do it by, as you can see, many, many categories here on my screen. And, whether it's supply chain or PLM or new product introduction, the categories are endless. So, and that's part of how we help build a business case. And a lot of that has to do with profiling and understanding your data and being able to show the relationship between data and the business process. So hope that answers the question.